Welcome back to another episode of the Secret Signing Tunnel, where the rumors don't go away and the player movements never end. Moley, we're going to be covering a fair bit this week between coaches and players. Let's get stuck straight into it. But for listeners out there, make sure you're following across all platforms. Moley's going to share it across his as well. So make sure you give him the follow so you don't miss anything. We're going to get straight into a viewer's question this morning from Luke Sullivan. Do we know where Brandon Smith is going to end up?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Diz. Well, it's probably more or easier to say where Brandon Smith won't end up. He won't be going to the Cowboys. He let his feelings be known there. He spent some time up there before, and he's pretty straight talker, Brandon Smith. And he said, "There's no way I'm going back there. He won't be going back to the Storm. I don't think they'll take him back. He won't be a Rooster." So there's three clubs we can put the red felt pen through straight away. There's a few clubs who need a good hooker. I guess that's the best way to look at it. But he doesn't come cheap too. So the Eels certainly don't have a top class hooker. Um, Bulldogs are pretty well suited with Reed Marnie, and he's on a fair chunk of salary cap, so he won't be going there.
We go back abroad over to New Zealand, do you think?
There's always that chance, yeah. Kiwis tend to go home after a bit of time here, and I think he did mention he wouldn't mind going home. But then Wade Egan again is one of the best hookers in the NRL, so you'd have to get over the top of him. So yeah, it's
The only other club I can think of is probably the Rabbitohs.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess you look at the Tigers going forward. Appy's in his early 30s now. He's probably slowing down a bit in because we're talking for 2026. So maybe they'll come into play. And they always seem to have plenty of money to spend, the Tigers. So who knows?
Yeah, well, let's see what happens. Now, breaking news coming out of New South Wales Rugby League headquarters. Laurie Daly is set to be announced as the coach to take over Michael Maguire, who's obviously at the Broncos now. What do you think of that appointment?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. They could have gone one or two ways. They could have gone a Matt King, an untried coach, but they've decided to take, I guess, the more conservative approach and go with Laurie Daly, who had the job before and didn't do all that great, but he had it when Queensland were at their peak. They've lost a lot of those great players now, and it's more an even battle. And he takes over a team that's the holders of the trophy. So, it's a great opportunity for him to cement the job for quite a few years down the track. If he can get some success next season and make it back-to-back wins for New South Wales, because, as you know, the Blues don't often win them back-to-back.
I think a bit of continuity amongst the Blues squad is necessary. Credit where credit's due with Michael Maguire. He picked the best side on paper, which delivered on the day. And do you know what? There won't be too many changes outside maybe Cleary coming in for Mitchell Moses if he's fit. Outside that, they're pretty much full strength, you'd think. Latrell Mitchell maybe a sniff there. But they really need just an experienced coach to sort of lead them around the park and, do those little one percenters because there's not much Origin coach can teach really the players how to play.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's going to pick 17 players and they all know how to play footy. I guess the biggest challenge is to pick the right 17 players, which New South Wales often hasn't done in the past. Michael Maguire did. He was pretty ruthless. He axed blokes who hadn't performed. He picked it strictly on form. And let's not forget, they were 1-0 down. Joseph Swahili got sent off in that first game, and I think everyone, including myself, thought that was the series then and there, done and dusted. And he won in Queensland, which not many New South Wales coaches have done. So full marks to Michael Maguire. I would say Laurie Daly knows him. He was played under him when he was a member of the coaching staff at the Raiders. So I wouldn't be surprised if Laurie makes a few calls to Madge and gets a few tips on who to pick and how to handle it.
Yeah, and staying with coaches, it seems like Adam Blair's picked up a role.
Yeah, that's right. It's a story I wrote this morning. The Knights signed Adam Blair, who's actually been coaching the Warriors lower grades the last couple of years, and he, of course, is one of the biggest name players to come out of New Zealand, a 300 gamer, and they signed him as a pathways executive. But I spoke to Adam Blair, and he said he's very keen to do some coaching, and he's spoken to Adam O'Brien, who he knows. They were at Melbourne together, and he's going to do some wrestling coaching, some forwards coaching. So that's an interesting development for the Knights and quite a coup for them.
Now, speaking of coaches, Shane Flanagan is reportedly being poached by another club. What light can you sort of shed here?
Yeah, that's a story I wrote last week, and it's created quite a bit of interest. I'm sworn the secrecy is to the club, but it's not the Tigers, because that's what everyone said straight away. It's got to be the Tigers. But another club, it's a bit early to say poached, but another club is interested in him. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
And it's a
because
club
he's off
that's been,
contract next year, right?
yeah, he's under contract for next year, so we're
Yep.
talking 2026. But as we know, contracts can often be broken, and this club's about to make contact with him through a third party. And
Mhm.
if A leads to B, and they come to terms, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that it could happen next season. I mean, what's the point of having a coach on the books if you know he's going somewhere else the following season? So,
Yeah,
but
well, watch this space.
quite a bit of dots to be connected yet, but it's one to keep our eyes on anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Now, back to the Knights. James Schiller, for those who haven't seen the headlines, he was sort of played a few games there for the Raiders this year, came in, did a really good job. I think he scored sort of 6 tries in 5 games or something like that. Uh, he's gone to the Knights. Um, Good little backup signing there for the Knights, who are in much need of some depth. Now, a few other signings around the grounds people may have missed. Jet Cleary, the younger brother of Nathan Cleary, he is now at the Warriors. Carl Launton from the Manly Seagulls is now up north in North Queensland at the Cowboys. Max Fegai from the Dragons and Junior Tupou from the Tigers are now at the Dolphins. Now, these sort of signings sort of flew under the radar. You probably wouldn't call them major signings, but for those people who support the respective clubs, definitely some news worth noting there. Now, the latest sort of rumor to rear its head, and believe it's a done deal, is Ronald Volkman has secured a deal at the Eels, provided he passes his final medical.
Yeah, that's right. I think Diz, it'll be a train and trial situation where he'll get his chance in the trials, and if he goes well, he'll get a contract, and he'll be a very handy backup to Mitchell Moses, who, of course, I think he only played 8 games last season, so they could well use a backup there. He's always been a talented player. Injuries have held him back. I think he was on the Dragons books a couple of years ago, and it all fell apart because of injury. At the Warriors, he had a few games and looked a fair player. So you never know. These are the bargain buys that could turn out good signings.
Look, he's still young, and the Eels need some much needed depth. So, especially in that halfback position, provided some cover there for Dylan Brown in case he gets injured or suspended, and vice versa for Mitch Moses if he gets selected again for New South Wales as well. Some good little cover there for the Eels if they can get the best out of Ronald. Now, sticking with the Eels, Brendan Hands and Sean Russell have both signed a contract extension to the end of 2026. So that sort of locks up a couple of, again, some more depth players. It looks like Brendan Hands at this point in time, I know we're talking about the Eels and needing a world-class hooker, but it looks like Brendan Hands has secured the job there at number 9 at the Eels for the foreseeable future. But Sean Russell provides some much-needed depth to the outside backs. How do you think the Eels are looking?
Yeah, well, it's going to be interesting, isn't it? I wouldn't have let Reagan Campbell Gillard go. I would have released or let Junior Paulo test the market. I think Campbell Gillard showed a lot more than Paulo last season, so it was a bit of a surprise. I think much depends on the fitness of Mitchell Moses. That they really struggled without him last year. Dylan Brown, to his credit, stepped up. He became the chief playmaker and did a good job, but didn't have a lot of help around him. Of course, Gutho's gone, so that'll be interesting how they go without him, who takes over at fullback. But they've got a pretty solid squad, the Eels. So they missed the 8 and finished closer to the bottom than the top. But I expect them under a new coach, a guy like Jason Riles, who clearly has done his apprenticeship, knows his stuff, to do all right, to be sort of on the fringe of the 8.
Yeah, and Mark Gasnier will provide some, I guess, key intel around the attacking side for the Eels, or the attacking component of the Eels, should I say. Jason Riles, as we know, is a forward. Back in the day, Mark Gasnier, elite back in his day, joining forces, at the Eels there, young Isaiah Ayongi from Penrith looks to get first crack at fullback spot now that Gutherson's moved on. And I think, look, there's been a lot of hype around him. He's obviously played under Dylan Edwards there at Penrith in a good system. So I think it's now just time to let him rep in and show his colours, and let's see what the Eels have got to offer. I think there's a couple more signings to go under the bridge before the season starts. So watch this space, everyone. Now, moving towards another signing that people may not know of, Moses Leo. He came out of New Zealand Rugby Sevens. Have you seen much on this guy, Molly? He's off to the Melbourne Storm.
Yeah, I saw a little bit of him on YouTube, and
Yeah.
looks a pretty handy player. And by the time he gets through a Craig Bellamy off season, he'll be an even better player. So, and of course, Bellamy just has this knack, and it's why I think he's the best coach in NRL. He just picks players out of nowhere and turns them into champions. Like look at Will Warbrick. We'd never heard of him a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
He's in the top 3 or 4 wingers in the game. And,
Yep.
I could go on and list players who've come from nowhere and become really very good players at the Storm. So he's
Yeah. Eli
one to
Katoa
keep
is a
an eye
prime
on.
example of that, isn't he?
Exactly. Yeah, he was just a battler at
Sean
the
Blaw couldn't even
Warriors.
make the starting lineup at the Tigers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. As I said, I mean, I guess the classic is Jerome Hughes. He played
Yeah.
one game at the at the Gold Coast and got cut, one game at the Cowboys and got cut, and this was over a period of 5 or 6 years. Craig Bellamy obviously saw something there, gave him a chance, and now
Mm.
he's right up there with Ivan Cleary as the best halves in the game.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he's
Incredible.
obviously got the knack.
Incredible. Now, speaking of brilliant players, James Tedesco, he signed a 1-year contract extension at the Chooks. So he's going to remain at the club to the end of 2026. I'd envisage Molly's probably going to see out the rest of his career at the club there and potentially retire at the end of 2026. I reckon he can keep going. But it looks like he's going to finish out his career there. And congratulations to Teddy. What do you think of that?
Yeah, it's interesting. He only signed for the 1 year. He's in his early 30s now, but probably turned back the clock this season. I reckon he played better this year. He lost the New South Wales fullback spot, of course, to Dylan Edwards, but I think in a way that might have helped his club form, and he was very good for the Roosters. Probably the best he's been for the last 2 or 3 years. So it's interesting he only re-signed for one season. I think he's taking it, as the old saying goes, 1 year at a time, see how his body holds up. But you're spot on there. I think he'll finish his days as a Rooster and get a job within the club as an ambassador, as someone on the coaching staff. I think they'll look after him the same way they looked after Mitch Orbison, who was a great clubman for them over the years and is now general manager of football or a similar type position.
Yeah, obviously Teddy being captain of the club there, and he only finished 1 point off Jerome Hughes last season. That's how good a season he had in the Dally M standings. Now, let's go to the big news that everyone's been talking about. Grant Anderson to the Broncos before we talk about Ben Hunt. Grant Anderson some look. I actually really rate Grant Henderson. I thought he had a great year at the Storm when he filled in for a few of those games. I think he was actually quite unlucky not to keep his starting spot, to be honest, there in the centres. But, Jack Howarth had an amazing season as well, and Nick Meaney is the goal kicker. So it's very hard to fit into that elite Storm squad. But a great signing for the Broncos, I think.
Yeah, I think he is. He can fill several backline spots. So come Origin time, when their depth gets a bit skinny, he can play, as you say, centre wing, fullback. And yeah, he did look good at the Storm. But a word of caution: so many players over the years have left the Storm, and their form has gone downhill. So again, it's a testament to Bellamy. So it'll be interesting to see whether he can keep up this form at another club.
Yeah, and finally, Ben Hunt officially signed at the Broncos. Massive news, not just for the Broncos, but for the NRL in general. What do you make of the signing, Moley, and how does this affect the Broncos' chances moving into next season and beyond?
Yeah, I think he's a great signing, and I still can't believe that the Dragons didn't figure out a way to keep him. 32 try assists last season. The rest of the club came up with 41 between them, so they beat him,
Mm,
but not by much. And that's a lot of strike power in an ordinary team. Uh,
mm,
all of a sudden, he's going to the Broncos, where there's attacking prowess all over the field.
yeah.
We've got Adam Reynolds, of course. And Ezra Mam, well, there's question marks over what exactly is going to happen with him after his off-field problems. So maybe
Mm.
it'll be the veteran combination of Hunt and Reynolds, but they're both slowing down a bit, but they're both such clever, talented players and got so much strike power around them that it could be a masterstroke.
Oh, yeah.
And of
And
course, he also plays hooker, so that's
that's
something
it.
else that could happen.
Well, if Ezra Ram comes back, obviously, from his suspension or whatever he's going to receive, Ben Hunt slips straight into hooker. And then all of a sudden, you've got Reece Walsh at the back, Ben Hunt at hooker, Mam and Reynolds in the halves. It's pretty scary stuff.
That's right. And I see the Broncos, of course, it's been so well documented. They had that terrible fall from grace last season after making the grand final, and really should have won the comp the year before. A new coach in Michael Maguire. We all know how tough Madge is. Kevy Walters, lovely bloke, but I think he just went a little bit too easy on him. Madge doesn't play Mr. Nice Guy. He's not going to let them look at their social media profiles all day. They're going to be
Yeah.
sweating and using those spew buckets that created quite a bit of controversy. I don't think there were spew buckets there the last couple of years, and maybe it's
No.
this tough love that they need. So time will tell, but I can see the Broncos being, top four, if not top two.
Well, thanks again for another awesome episode, Molly. You have an awesome week, and thanks to all the listeners out there. Make sure to give us a follow. Tune in every Monday night at 6 p.m. to hear the latest and greatest, and join you all next week.